If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator, digital forensic investigator, blogger, author, speaker. Every Friday night at freedomslips.com on Revolution Radio at 5 p.m. Pacific time for 2 hours. You join us every Friday night, and we bring you very interesting guests. Then we have a problem tonight, because what happened was I've been promoting Mark Rudd, who is Megaphone Mark. From the Doonesbury comic strip, and he was a member of the Weather Underground. In fact, he was a spokesman there. He's a member of SDS and a member of the Weather Underground, but I screwed up. I have to take the blame here. I totally screwed up in the booking. Mark told me he wasn't going to be able to come on until next week, but for some reason, I thought it was this week. I've been distracted with a lot of my own litigation. I got my own, I got the business to run. I got the radio show to run. I got the blog. But it turns out this month I have my own litigation that I'm working on, and I've been running around trying to handle that and take care of that. So I spread myself a little thin this week, and I screwed up with the booking. But we're in luck, because I was planning on booking Lorenzo Comboa Ervin, who was an original member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense way back in the 60s and the 70s. And Mr. Ervin is an elder statesman. And has an incredible story. And this man, I don't know how old he is. I didn't ask him his age. I guess it's impolite. But I can tell you, this is a man who is still fighting every day in the struggle. He has a conference coming up next week he's going to tell us about. I had planned on having him come on in the future, in April. But at the last minute, I called him up and I begged him to come on, and he was kind enough to come on. So I really got to thank him for that. And I'm going to promote his book from now till doomsday, okay, to return that favor. He's the author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. Mr. Ervin, are you there?
I'm here. Yes.
Thank you for coming on so much, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Well, can you tell us, okay, now I gave the audience a little bit of an idea of your history, just a very little bit, okay? But can you tell us what you're up to right now and about this conference coming up next week?
Well, it's a conference that was of a group that was started last year. The Ku Klux Klan came to Memphis, Tennessee, where I live and with my wife, and we're both activists, by the way. The Ku Klux Klan came to Memphis, and they came because they were protesting the names of some local parks, Confederate parks, that had, one of them had the name of the head of the original, one of the original leaders of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest. And this has always been a contested issue here in Memphis, especially the black community, but even white progressives have fought this for years and years and years to no avail, But anyway, we had a demonstration, a counter demonstration to the Klans coming, and we were able to get 1,500 people at the site where this is being held. And of course, we were surrounded by 450 riot cops, and they brought in a couple of armored personnel carriers, and they did all this stuff because they said that in 1998, when the Klan came, there had been a street riot and so forth, and so now they're going to bring this, this sort of
a militia. They're going to bring in an army, Yeah,
a fascist army essentially to control people who some I didn't even live in Memphis in 1998, but nevertheless, we were blamed. And they gave the Klan first-class treatment. They gave them their own guards. They brought them in special buses and all this kind of stuff. But gave them a special designated spot that nobody else could stand at all day long, and this sort of thing. And we were surrounded, like I said, by riot cops, kept in barbed wire and all this stuff. And
how many Klansmen showed up? How many Klans showed up?
And there were only about 75 Klansmen that even came. They claim they're going to have hundreds or thousands or something or other, but, that's just hyperbole. It's just a fake message.
But it's encouraging. It's encouraging, though, that you can come up with 1,500 guys, and you can only come up with barely 65, 70.
Well, that was quite interesting to us because the media had effectively kept us from getting the word out of even there being a demonstration. And then at the last minute to show how generous, as the way they put it, the authorities were, they told the people that there had been a permit granted, and ours was the only permit granted. Everybody else who tried were denied, and we were denied twice before we were able to get a permit for this counter demonstration. And so we were able to get the word out, and we had about 300 people come here from out of town, and there were about 1,200 people living here came out. And this was in the rain, and it rained all that day. It was a miserable day, but there were people coming in droves, all day long to protest the Klan's coming. And all this took place after the mayor and all the the Chamber of Commerce and all these people had put out the message for weeks on end that people should not come down and protest. People should just stay away. This, that, and other. Nobody paid that any attention. And in fact, people came down in large numbers. So this was the kind of the start of the movement. And of course, we've had a long series of police brutality cases happen here. And we also had a conference a couple of weeks before that, and people came from 10 cities. So we had been active during that period last year at this time. And so the meeting that's being held this coming weekend is like just a follow-up from that. Okay. And people are coming from other cities and so forth. And we're trying to bring together a network of anti-racist persons, all nationalities and so forth, trying to bring them together and to talk about how do we organize against police brutality? How do we organize against these, white racist or fascist elements like the Klan? They're still, pretty strong in the South. They have a presence. They're not hundreds of thousands, but they're strong enough to do some damage. So we have to talk about how we, organize to defeat them, to keep them from getting a mass base. And so we're having this conference this coming weekend with the idea of being able to bring together activists or people who want to be activists from all over the South and Midwest particularly. And so we're asking people who are in those areas, to contact for information. We'll give that information out before I leave.
No, we'll do it right now. How do people get a hold of you if they want to get involved in this?
Yeah, March 29th and 30th, from 12 o'clock, from 9 in the morning for 2 days, 9 in the morning to 6 in the evening. It's going to be, let me get the flyer. It's going to be at the Ida B. Wells Coalition Anti-Racist Conference. Topics will include the following: organizing against mass imprisonment of people of color, fighting poverty and unemployment amongst people of color, what we fight and how, the anti-fascist mission in the 21st century America. Then there's the progressive plantation, fighting racism inside white radical social change groups. And then they've got hip-hop art, the streets and the struggle, and fighting police brutality and white supremacy, which is not going to be the last issue, but they got it listed last. Yeah. And it's going to be, as I said, on March 29th, it's going to start at 10 o'clock a.m. to 7 p.m., run all day long. March 20th is going to start from 10 to 3, and it's going to end there. It's going to be located at the Pilgrim House Conference and Retreat Center, the Pilgrim House Conference and Retreat Center, First Congregational Church, 1000 South Cooper Street, Memphis, Tennessee. And you can get information by contacting Ida B. Wells, INKC. That's the contact location for this is in Kansas City, actually. Ida B. Wells, INKC, which is all one word, at gmail.com, or you can call 505-205-7909, and that's 505-205-7909, and that's the, as I said, the Ida B. Wells Coalition.
Okay, and, my producer will be putting that. Yeah, my producer will be putting that right now in the chat room and also too
Okay.
on the Facebook page. Now, your Facebook page, you have one yourself, which is Black Autonomy Federation.
That's correct. Black Autonomy Federation, which is an African-American activist organization. There's a possibility of contacting us as well. We were the founders of the Ida B. Wells Coalition, although, other people obviously are running it.
Well, let me ask you a question, because this is very encouraging to me to hear that there's still guys out there really organizing and out there in the streets, doing what has to be done. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 67 years old.
67 years old, and you still got boots to the ground, fighting, organizing every single day. I got to take my hat off to you, my friend, okay? You're an elder statesman in the movement, and people... Do you see a lot of young guys coming up to fill your shoes?
Well, there's been some participation with younger people. We've always tried to encourage and everything. And point of fact, in January just of this year, we had a conference, a so-called hip-hop activist conference here in Memphis. And people came from at least 10 different cities, and young people, and went back, and we trained them. We trained them in organizing techniques and our ideas and so forth about black community activism, especially. And they left and went back to their cities, and they are organizing groups now in their cities. So there's been, some young people have responded. One of the problems is the ability to communicate and to reach these younger people. That's always a problem. But if you can reach them with a message, and if you can let them know that as you say, I'm still active, I'm still doing things. You don't have to be 20 years old to be doing this. You can continue doing this the rest of your life if that's what you make your mission to be. And so we've been able to get some young people. We haven't been able to get droves of them. But, as we go along, we're able to do that, to get younger people. Because we think that the youth have the energy and once they're trained, have the ability to go out in the communities and reach people and win them over and have them train others to do this thing. This is what we're doing. We don't plan to do this forever, but we just might seem to be.
Yeah,
my wife is. She's also an activist in this struggle.
Now, are there any young guys? Are there any young guys out there who caught your eye, caught your attention, that you want to give them a shout out and encourage them on the air? In particular?
Well, there's a young man at the University of Memphis, Brandon Shaw, at the University of Memphis, that we've started working with him. We've known him for some time. We're working with him, and we have a lot of respect for what he does. He's, a university student. And there are others. There's some in New York. One person came, sat on a bus for 28 hours to get here, and just to be at the conference. And we wanted, and this person, was a very serious individual. He's in New York, and he's been able to organize a group there. And then there's a young woman out of Denver, Colorado, who came to the conference. Trish, they call her. And so there are people like these two young people. They're still in high school.
Oh, great.
Then there's others who are in, like I said, college and just persons in their 20s, young adults who came to this thing, who came to this event, and it was a phenomenal meeting, one of the best meetings I've ever been to. I've been to many of them over my lifetime, but it was an important meeting. You had serious-minded individuals who came at long distance to be here. Came from, one person even came from California. To be here in Memphis, Tennessee. And people came from, as I said, 10 cities. Well, what we're finding out is that there are young people committed to doing things. They may be listening to this program. I mean, since I'm coming on, basically sort of blind,
Yeah, I know.
But still, the point is that, you know, I don't know that they want any special, you know, public attention, more than to say that they're helping to build a movement now of the sort we were trying to build in the 1960s, to be quite honest. We want participatory democracy, for one thing. We want an end to racism and police brutality. We want people to not starve to death in the cities, you know, because of poverty and oppression. We want an end to the limousine liberalism, you know, like you got at this period with the president and the other, as well as on the other side, the conservative party that is just like one side of a coin. But so we're trying to express a certain kind of politics to young people that this is where we came from out of the 1960s when we were fighting against racism, for civil rights, against police brutality, because that's what the Black Panther Party was founded against. Around was a struggle against police brutality. And
I got a couple questions for you before we get into that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and again, I want to thank you for coming on. I really feel good listening to you. It makes me feel encouraged. Okay. Now, you're right about my audience. My audience, this may be new to them. Okay, but I'm trying to educate them and expose them to this kind of thing. Okay. As far as your audience, this archive will be up on YouTube. It'll be up on 2 different YouTube channels. One will be the Talk Revolution Radio YouTube channel, and the other one will be the Opperman Report YouTube channel, and it'll have your name in it and your book. So when people search you out, they'll be able to hear you, when your followers and your associates, and also to listen to my people and expose your people to my people. So you know, we'll get together. You know. Now, a question for you, because I know a big part of your story is about COINTELPRO and how you were under COINTELPRO attack, as I was myself. I'm from the Lower East Side of New York City. I was with the Yippies in the 70s, a few years after you were out there, okay? I was out there a few years later, and, you know, I had my associations. You know, I met Al Sharpton and stuff like that, and Reverend Herbert Daughtry, and all those guys, Black Vets for Social Justice, you know, all those guys on the Lower East Side. Rock Against Racism we ran. So I experienced COINTELPRO attack. I think I still do till today. Now, do you experience it still today, you think?
Yeah, we're being harassed as of this period right now. In fact, I'm monitoring on Facebook. I already know this by the Memphis Police Department.
Sure.
They've been using the Facebook management, for instance, to harass me, to limit what I'm able to do. You know, especially with the online version of Black Autonomy Federation. Not only that, we've been harassed when we've attempted to hold, you know, political events. You know, the first thing we did when we first got to Memphis a few years ago was to have a demonstration, or attempt to have a demonstration downtown, and just pass out flyers and so forth to let people know the extent of police brutality in the city of Memphis, which actually leads the nation in the number of civilian shootings and deaths by police officers.
Where, Memphis?
Memphis, Tennessee, yes.
I didn't know
there have
that.
been 24 people killed here since February of 2012.
Well, you know, I'm in Las Vegas, Henderson, Nevada, and I think we're close. We're close behind you. We have the cops are shooting people down here left and right, both white, black, Hispanic. I think
that's right.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care who they shoot over here.
No,
you know, they shoot them all.
And the cops here, the police department here is mostly black.
Really?
Because it's a majority black city, and it doesn't matter. But the majority of police victims have been African American. You know, there have been some whites killed here too. So if they're, they killed something. Some guy, they called him a hoarder, an animal hoarder.
Right.
And they go in, and this is a strange place. They care more about animals than they do about people here. And if you are even rumored to be, abusing animals, they'll rush in on you with guns blazing. We've seen people go to prison here who are working at the animal shelter, the official animal shelter run by the city government. We've seen people go to prison here because somehow they were supposed to be mistreating animals or so forth. But in the city jail and in the county jail, I should say, people have been beaten and killed in the county jail and there's been no recourse whatsoever. There's been no federal investigation. There's been no investigation of how they died, and it's just like as though they were the dogs who were killed and nobody cared about them. So you've got a real serious problem here with the official use of violence by the authorities here, and then there's a tremendous cover-up by the federal government as well as city and state authorities. So it's a serious problem here, and as you said, it's repeated all over the country. You know, where you are in Nevada, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, they've got it there, but you know this is happening in Memphis. Of course, we know that it's happening in other parts of the country. It's just that in the since 2012, I think that Memphis actually leads the nation in terms of people who've been killed by police authorities.
Okay, we got 4 minutes until the break, okay? So I want to ask you, because now you've been around a long time, you've been fighting a long time. Do you think, compared to when you first were inspired and motivated to join the Black Panthers and start up the Black Panther Party for self-defense, back to the original Black Panther Party, compared to today, do you think things were more oppressive then or now?
Well, I don't think they're more oppressive. What I think is that it's a different form of oppression.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Back in the 1960s, you did not have mass homelessness. You did not have mass imprisonment.
Right.
There are many things that we live with today in terms of, economic and political inequality didn't exist in the 1960s. Now, there was different forms. Of course, you had outright racial segregation, and you had a great many other injustices that flowed out of that. You know what I mean? Racism and white supremacy by the Ku Klux Klan, and this kind of thing was going on for years and years in the South, and even in the North, you had a great many things happening in terms of racial segregation, open racial segregation to deprive people not only the right to, as you said, to vote or whatever, but actually to prevent them from even enjoying what people consider, whites at least, consider to be their birthright in this country, to enjoy, that they wouldn't be discriminated against because of their race.
Yeah, getting a job, getting an apartment.
Yeah.
And even like a gathering in a park back in the old days. See, a lot of people, these young kids today, they don't realize how it was back in those days. That just a bunch of young black men, because I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in the South Bronx. You know who lived in the same building as me? Africa Mabara from the Sugar Hill Gang. Okay, you talk about the rap community. Hey, but let me ask you a question real quick, because we're coming up to a break. What do you think about rap, this rap music? Do you think it's good for young kids to what do you think? Is it positive or negative?
Well, it is both positive and negative. You've got different elements. You had it in the early 80s. You were talking about Africa Bambaataa and all this. Yeah. That was message music. That was political message music that was influenced by the civil rights, Black Power, and all this. And what happened later on is that the corporations created gangster rap that everybody criticizes. The corporations created that, and the corporations took advantage of it. And we just had this conference here, and in Memphis where we had these hip hop artists come. They weren't nationally known hip hop artists; they're actually underground radical hip hop artists. But they came and they talked at great length about that. How the government and the corporations created this kind of hip hop
to control.
Replace, Public Enemy and all these people like this that advocated racial pride, advocated opposing the war, and these kind of things. It was a kind of music. It was message music, as opposed to what's happening right now, which is bling and denigration type of music. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's my opinion, and it's not only just my opinion. There were a lot of people at that conference who wanted for the first time understood that, because a considerable number of people came.
Seems like across the board, though, all kinds of music, though, that the corporations have taken over, and especially when you see these, Justin Biebers and these Miley Cyruses, man, I don't know what's going on over there. That just seems to be.
But you know what? Do you get the feeling that this stuff is sort of converging now? Like you say, Miley Cyrus, the stuff she's doing is the same kind of garbage that's been happening in hip hop for years. This with denigration of women, and here she's voluntarily jumping in with this garbage.
Well, I think I don't know what your religion is, but I think there's a satanic element to this. But anyway, we're coming up to a break. We're with Lorenzo Kamboa Ervin, author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. He's an original member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. This man, he's still 67 years old, okay, and he's still out there putting his blood on the line. When you hear the rest of his story, okay, from way back in the 60s, the man has an incredible story, fighting the good fight, and I got to take my hat off to him, and we'll be right back after this break. And remember, Lorenzo, we can't talk during the break, okay, my friend? Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the author of the book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator. You can find it up on Amazon.com. I want to remind everybody that Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, is a listener-sponsored station. We take no corporate sponsorship. We take no advertising money. If you want to keep the station on the air, if you want to keep people like Lorenzo, Comboa, Ervin on our air, you have to go to the website, freedomslips.com, and you have to click on the donate button. Now, Lorenzo, Comboa, I hope I'm doing that middle name right there, my friend. Lorenzo Comboa Ervin. That's good enough? Okay.
That's good enough.
Okay, my friend, thank you. Okay, he's an original member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, which is not the same Black Panther Party that's out there today, and we'll get into that in a minute as well. But he's the author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. A fascinating story, but we were kind of talking. I want to get into his whole history because this man is an elder statesman. He's an original street fighter. And I really want to get into his whole story. He took on COINTELPRO. He took on the man was kidnapped by the CIA. Okay, I want to thank one of my producers, Keith Davis, who brought Mr. Ervin to me and told me his story, and just a fascinating story. And I can't wait to get into it. But a couple of questions for you first. I went looking for guys like you. Okay, original guys, like Mark Rudd from the Weather Underground. And I have Cynthia McKinney coming on. I have Cindy Sheehan coming on. Because my audience is, a lot of my audience, as well-meaning as they are, they're clueless, my friend. Okay? They're clueless. And they think that Barack Obama is a communist. And they think he's a Marxist. And they think he's, and they think all this kind of stuff. Can you straighten us out on that? What do you think of Barack Obama?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Barack Obama was too young to have been part of those events that took place in the 1960s and 1970s, But he, I used to live in his, the interesting thing is I used to live in his district at one time. Actually within the last 10 years when I was living in Chicago. We lived there until 2006. And the thing about it, he's a young activist type. When I say activist, I don't mean hardcore activist, in the street. He was one of the people who came along in the late 1970s and 80s that did organizing through churches and all this sort of thing. Who did liberal reform politics and so forth. And so later he decided to run for office. He's never been a radical, and when I say radical, I mean he's never been in favor of really dismantling organized power, economic and social power bases, of the rich, and he's never opposed police brutality. He's never opposed racism. He's never taken any really what these politicians call, or these political consultants call, unsafe kind of politics that'll come back to you someday.
Right.
He's never taken any kind of radical position. He's never been against the war. He's not against, and even when he was running for office, he made it clear that he wasn't against the war. He was against their policies.
Do you consider him to be an ally? Do you consider him to be an ally or not?
No.
Okay.
He's in office. His role is to be in office to keep the rest of us in line, especially the black community.
Between Barack Obama
and progressive. Well, that's interesting because if you look at his policies, I haven't seen any real differences. He continues to have the same prison establishment in this country where massive numbers of poor and people of color are kept in the longest confinement of anywhere in the world. He continues to carry out the aggressive foreign policy in terms of wars. In fact, the wars that Bush fought, he's trying to carry them to fruition, trying to finish them off. and his policies favor the super rich over working people for sure. You know,
Look at
and
Obama.
so I gotta say I don't see a lot of differences in the policy. Now, there's a lot of differences maybe in style.
Yeah.
But there's no differences that I'm able to see in policy, except he's supported by one group of billionaires. He's supported by one group of billionaires, while Bush was supported by another, you know.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to push the envelope.
Yes.
I'm going to push the envelope. What do you
Sure.
think today, not Reverend Al Sharpton that I knew back in the 70s and the 80s, what do you think of the Reverend Al Sharpton today?
He's in their pocket.
Yeah.
He's the barking dog. He's the bulldog for Obama.
Breaks my heart, because I like him, you know?
Well, but he's not the same man.
He's not.
He's not the same man that you were talking about as a community activist.
Yeah.
He's representative of a whole class of black politicians and ex-leaders, political leaders that have sold their soul to corporate America, have sold their soul to in this case, the Democratic Party. These people no longer serve.
I don't know if did you ever read that story in the Village Voice about Al Sharpton's campaign for presidency? That it was totally supported by that same right-wing group of dirty tricksters that ran the Nixon campaign?
That's right.
You know that
That's
story
right.
then, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm familiar with a lot of his campaigns.
Yeah.
I knew about him coming out of, I knew about him having ties to the FBI.
Yeah.
I knew about him, that I'm not thoroughly familiar with the campaign, but I do know that he was financed, and his campaign was financed and controlled by some very bad elements in American politics.
How do you think about Jesse Jackson? Jesse Jackson these days. What do you think of him?
Well, I've never been a supporter of Jesse Jackson, to be quite honest. I don't like the fact that he's so in bed with the politicians and actually the wing of the government that maintains the system, but doesn't have any changes. One of the things in the 60s, what you had was changes. People were in the streets, participatory democracy, fighting. And what you got now is these charismatic leaders. They take control of struggles, and they keep people from getting out in the streets to struggle, except in the way that they and those who finance them want them to struggle. You know what I'm saying?
Controlled opposition.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're an oppositional force that is under the control of the very forces that they claim to be fighting.
Okay.
You got a lot of that in this period. It is, in fact, it's counterinsurgency. Back in the 60s, we talked about counterintelligence. Well, counterintelligence was designed, the groups that got following was designed to break those groups up and discredit their leaders. Now they're trying to completely co-opt struggles, completely co-opt them, and then turn their leaders and what have you into paid agents of the government. So that's what.
Or blackmailed agents. I think
Jackson
there's a lot of blackmail involved as well.
Well, there is, because these guys are corrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't hear about the scandals they're involved with, simply because they pay people off.
Yeah. Okay, so let's hear about a young Lorenzo Camboa Ervin. He's coming up in life, and he sees things he doesn't like, and he decides to do something about it. Let's hear about that. What motivated you to start organizing?
First of all, as I said, I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And when I came up in the 1950s, the South was still a segregated society, And when I say segregated, for those people who don't know, we're talking about racial segregation, where black people enjoyed no rights whatsoever under the system. And so the struggle in the 1950s with black youth like me was against segregation. We sought ways to resist segregation. Of course, in my case, the sit-in movement came along in the year of 1960, and I was at that time I was about 13 years old, and I got involved like many other black youth of that period, and not only just black youth, a lot of youth period got involved in the struggle and used the protest of just sitting in to make a statement that we would resist racism, in our daily lives and in terms of government policy. Because one thing to be aware of is it wasn't just a question of some whites in the South who just hated blacks. It was government policy that we were resisting. It was policies set into place by government officials. And they had been able for years and years to stave off any kind of intervention from the federal government or, people in other parts of the country caring about what was happening in the South. And so there was a reign of terror. I mean, literally, the Ku Klux Klan killed people. They set bombs if people tried to vote. They shot people down in the streets. All this sort of long history of racial terrorism. Many of these cases are still being solved today, if you will. And so when I saw all of this as a young person, and when the wing of the city and movement came to my hometown, and it was spreading all over the South at this time in 1960, there was a massive protest. My cousin
Let me interrupt you for 1
one
second, okay? Now, as a young man, did you experience things like, or have friends of lynchings or cross burnings and things like that, like firsthand kind of experiences?
Well, I didn't personally see people myself lynched, but I knew of cases where a man was lynched in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, right outside Chattanooga, in fact. He was hanged and thrown off a railroad trestle, railroad bridge, and just laid there. They kept him on a rope there for days on end, to terrorize the black population.
Did you discuss that case with Did you discuss that case with Cheryl McCollum?
Cheryl McCollum.
Yeah, the Cold Case Investigative Unit.
No, I had never done it. No.
Okay, because she told me she had spoken to a member of the Black Panther Party who was a historian. I thought maybe by coincidence it was the same guy. Okay, but how about...
it wasn't me.
Yeah, how about cross burnings and stuff like that? You must have...
Plenty of cross burnings. They were burning crosses. In fact, up till sometimes in the 1980s, we were having difficulties with cross burnings in Chattanooga. With the Ku Klux Klan in Chattanooga, they shot some black women in 1980, and it caused the so-called race riot there. And there were other instances where they had tried to intimidate black people, had murdered black people, and so there was still all this stuff going on in the 1980s,
right?
Which stemmed from the earlier period in the 1950s when they were trying to fight school integration and trying to fight the civil rights movement. And so, as a young man, seeing this kind of terrorism, this racism, experiencing firsthand someone spitting in your face or someone, trying to intimidate you and all this kind of thing, that made me into, I didn't call myself that at the time, but it made me into a radical. And it made me understand that we would have to come together in some sort of movement. Now, I wasn't a leader then. I was too young to be a leader, but I was actually in the NAACP at the time, which was a different organization then from what it is now, although it has always been pretty conservative. And one of the first things we did was, when we formed the youth wing of the civil rights movement, was to get involved in the sit-in campaign, which was going all over the country. It was spreading from city to city after it started in North Carolina in that year of 1960. It just spread that year everywhere, and all over the South and even parts of the North and Midwest. And so I saw this, and I became captivated by it. That struggle is the moment that made me into an activist, and that was what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I was convinced that sometimes people can see those things or things touch them at a certain stage in their life, and it changes them forever.
Yeah. And
that was what changed it for me forever. The youth wing of the civil rights movement in 1960. This was different from Dr. King's wing of the civil rights movement. His thing came out of Alabama at an earlier stage in the mid 1960s. This was started in 1960. And the tactic of the city, which is similar to the occupation movement or the Occupy movement that we've had, just last year or year before last. So that's what motivated me. That's what inspired me. And to see black people who've been subjected to humiliation, terror, and intimidation, to see these people standing up against white supremacy and against corrupt governments, because as I said, in essence, what you're talking about is the government protected the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan was a champion of these rich white people in the South and these government officials. They could carry on the illegal or extra legal activities for the Klan. So I was inspired by this, and that took me into years of activism, direct. And then, of course, it got me later, at a later stage, when the Black Power movement came along, or SNCC itself, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, became a Black Power organization. Then I was effectively joining the Black Panther Party around that time. They merged briefly.
What city did you join the Black Panther Party for self-defense?
I'm sorry?
In what city did you join?
I was in Chattanooga.
Okay, so you were in the Tennessee chapter.
Right.
Okay, what do you think about the current day Black Panther Party? The new Black Panther Party?
Well, I'm going to be quite honest with you. I don't think there is a Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
That's been the criticism for quite some time, not only by myself, but by other old Panthers. And that is, we don't really recognize this thing. It is something created by the Nation of Islam. It's a farce. In fact, it's worse than a farce. It's an outright joke. And it does nothing to deal with the problems, the urgent problems of the black community. That's the most damning thing. Any group that comes into existence, and especially if you use the name of the Black Panther Party, has to justify its existence. And I think that this organization is a fraud. I don't think that they're doing anything. I think they're getting their pictures taken and put on television and so forth and so on, but I don't see any work being done in the black community.
But also, let me ask you this. How can the leaders of this group, when they have all kinds of warrants and all kinds of, they're on parole for this and they're on this, how could they be out in the public making public death threats and stuff like that, and nothing happens to them?
Well, I don't want to speculate and say that they are agents for the government or anything.
But
I'll just say
but you do gotta
that
wonder.
they're not considered seriously. They're not considered seriously by the government.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that in some instances, they may be advising the government that, for instance, that if they're going to do something. Back in the 60s, you had a situation developed with the original Black Panther Party where they dealt with another group, they called themselves a Black Panther Party, that would strut around with guns, but they'd be empty.
Right.
And they will have advised the police chief and the rest of them that they were coming and that their guns were empty and they didn't want a confrontation. Well, they were heavily criticized, and in fact beat up by the Black Panther Party of self-defense because of that, And this is similar to what I think is happening now. I really do believe that you've got a lot of posers, people who take pictures and selfies, as they call them now, and they show themselves in black uniforms, they show themselves in black combat boots and all this sort of thing, but they're not doing anything to really threaten the government. They're more than anything, they're able to say all this garbage because the government doesn't pay them any attention. And I think they get away with it because of that. I don't think they're seen as a serious threat.
Yeah, but you got to admit, their uniforms.
If you carried guns, they'd be shot and killed in the streets. But
you got to admit, they got cool-looking uniforms, right?
Well, but they're not uniforms I'm not familiar with seeing.
Yeah, okay.
It's just what I always say is that if that is all you've got, and you don't have a political program to change the conditions of people, to challenge the authorities, and to deal with the kind of really dire circumstances that black people, especially black people, but other peoples of color and poor people are suffering through in this period, then that group is a fraud.
I got you. Now tell us about the original Black Panther Party for self-defense and the 5-point program and the stuff you guys were doing to help the community.
Yeah. Well, there was a 10-point program
10-point.
For the Black Panther Party. I can't recite it to you word for word. But what I'll just say is that, it dealt with the actual needs of the community in terms of food, housing, protection from police brutality, call for an end to police brutality. It dealt, with all the conditions of poverty and exploitation by the rich in this country. So it was a revolutionary party, and it was a party that was basically an organization of community-based organizers, which you don't see very much of these days. In fact, you don't see that this so-called new Black Panther Party is a revolutionary organization at all, and you don't see where it's doing anything in the community, as far as any kind of organizing. It's not dealing with the main issues of black poverty and mass imprisonment and all these issues where the government is coming down on the black community. You don't see them up front leading any kind of campaigns or anything. And so I think what you got in this period and what this group represents, and it's not the only one, I'll be quite honest with you, because since the destruction of the original Black Panther Party, there have been 17 of these so-called new Black Panther Party formations. They haven't all been named New Black Panther Party, but there have been 17 groups that call themselves based on the politics of the Black Panther Party. And as I said, the basic failure of these groups is that they don't address anything in the black community. They're not visible in terms of doing anything about black oppression and all this stuff about marching around with guns on your hip and all of that. We learned back in the 60s that the original Black Panther Party actually stopped doing that. They stopped doing it because they saw it was provocative in a way that it didn't need to be. It's not that they didn't practice armed self-defense, or we didn't practice armed self-defense, but also understood that what was more important, and that alienated people from the party, in our own community, it alienated people.
Okay, Mr. Ervin, we're coming up to a break. Now, this is a nice long break, so you can make yourself a nice hot cup of tea and kind of heal your voice. We're with Lorenzo Kamboa Ervin, who is the author of
Anarchism and the Black Revolution.
Anarchism and the Black Revolution. Is that available on Amazon.com?
No, it's not available on Amazon.com yet, unfortunately.
Okay, well, don't worry.
I'll get the information where you can order it.
Okay, where can you order it, real quick?
Yeah. It's P&L Press in Denver, Colorado.
Well, we'll get to it when we get back, and I'm going to have it up on my blog. I'm going to have it on my blog, the Operaman Report.
Okay.
I want to thank Lorenzo Kamboa Ervin because he came on at the last second, and he also has a poll. This is great information. We'll be right back after this break. Okay, welcome back to the Operaman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio. We have the Operaman Report. And we bring on guests. So we're lucky enough to have a really good guest tonight, Lorenzo Kamboa Ervin, who's the author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. He's a former Black Panther. He has an incredible story, and I want to get into this whole story because he actually hijacked a plane when he was under COINTELPRO and Klan and police harassment. And then he was kidnapped by the CIA. He was taken back through the Czech Republic and flown back to the U.S. for trial. Just a fascinating story. The man's 67 years old. He filled in at the last second. We were supposed to have Mark Rudd on tonight. And I called up Mr. Ervin at the very last second. We were supposed to have him on in a few weeks. But I asked him, can you please come on tonight? And he was so kind. He has a cold. He's in the middle of one big street activism a couple of weeks ago. He has a conference coming up, but he took time out for us. Mr. Ervin, I'm going to have a link to your book on my blog, The Operaman Report. And it's going to be on there forever. Okay, and anytime you want to update that page, you should let me know. I'll update it for you. But where can we get a hold of your book, Anarchism and the Black Revolution?
You can get it at P&L Press. It's 2727 West 27th Avenue in Denver, Colorado, 80211. And I'll give you the email address in a moment. But I'll just give, again, P&L Press, 2727 West 27th Avenue, Denver, Colorado, 80211. You can order it there, or you can order it online from PL Printing at msn.com.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have all that up on the it'll be in the chat room right now. and we'll put it up on my Facebook, and it'll be on the blog. But I want to ask Mr. Ervin to come back in the future for sure, because this is the real deal. This is the real deal, folks. This is a guy who's telling it like it is. He's been there in the trenches. He's fought the good fight. He's an elder statesman in the movement, and we're lucky to have him. And I really thank you, Mr. Ervin, for coming on, first of all, at all, okay, and then coming on at the last second like you did. At 67 years old, I'm not saying that's old, because, you know, you're a tough guy, but, you know, but just to really be out there still struggling every day, you know. Do you have kids and grandkids?
Well, I don't, but my wife does.
Yeah, so, you know, you're out there, man.
Right.
I really appreciate it, and I take my hat off to you, man. You have all my respect. But I want to hear the whole story about how you were in the Black Panther Party for self-defense, you're under attack, and you had to take the extreme measure of hijacking a plane. Let's hear this.
Well, you know, a number of things were involved with that. You know, one is that, you know, realize that in 1968, the Black Panther Party and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had merged briefly. And the leaders of the Black Panther Party the leaders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee actually went into the Black Panther Party. And as a result of this, severe repression came down, especially in the South. You had what you call the Black Power grand juries. And these were, you know, local grand juries put on by mostly white public officials to harass, you know, persons who had been or were identified as being in the black movement. And in my case, I was charged, you know, I was harassed to testify before a grand jury about the Black Power movement. And one guy, they wanted me to be an informer.
Gotcha.
To railroad an activist, one particular activist, Willie Ricks, he was known as then. He was one of the key organizers in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Civil Rights period, and also was involved with the creation of the wing between the alliance between the Black Panther Party and SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And so they started harassing me endlessly. They picked me up. They gave me a good working over a few times. They threatened my life. And eventually, I was told by a black police officer who told me that I'd gone to school. He said, "If you don't get out of here, ma'am, they're going to kill you." He said, that's what they're talking about. If you don't cooperate, they're going to kill you.
Let me interrupt you for a second. Let me interrupt you for a second. Because a lot of people today, I'm involved in this community called the Awake and Aware community, where they're like whistleblowing and they're releasing information and stuff like that. And radio hosts like myself come on the radio and they complain about, oh, I'm under attack. Oh, I'm under surveillance. Oh, I'm being harassed. But now they used to pick you up in a police car and take you to a back alley and beat the crap out of you, right?
That's right.
All right. Tell us about that, my friend.
Well, you know, when I came out of the Army, first of all, I was in the Army. I came out in 1966. And in 1966 is when the Black Panther Party was founded. And I was an original member at that time. But I was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and later it merged with the Black Panther Party. Right. But at any rate, they were surveilling me almost from the day I got out of prison. I got out of the military.
Same thing, I wasn't aware of that. Right?
I'm sorry?
Prison and the Army, almost the same thing.
Yeah, well, in many ways, yeah. But at any rate, so they were surveilling me, and because they knew I was an anti-war activist. And one of the first campaigns that SNCC had after it broke away from the old line civil rights groups was it came out against the war, and it started, organizing young black men not to go into the military, to resist military induction, either by, going AWOL, or what they call AWOL, absent without official leave, or, just hiding themselves in another country or whatever, what have you, or living underground, but to not go into the military. And that was quite common back in those days, that the police and the FBI would be hunting people down who refused military induction. And they put people in jail. They put people in prison for that. I know people personally, activists who were in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that they put in prison for refusal to join the military. you know.
Muhammad Ali.
And well, yes, that's the most famous example. But you know, there are a lot of other people who were unsung heroes who went to prison rather than go to Vietnam as well, that were never known. You know what I'm saying? He was like, you know, Muhammad Ali was just the public expression of all of these people who had been resisting for years, especially these Southern draft boards. You could come in there, a Southern draft board, and be blind, crippled, and crazy, and they put you in the army anyway. So part of what we were doing by refusing to go into the military or organizing people refused to go into the military, the Southern states saw as treachery. So it's treason, actually. They saw what we were doing as treason. Now, there was no federal statute, what have you, that said that it was treason. But the FBI colluded with Southern judges. They colluded with Southern police chiefs and on and so forth in order to hound civil rights and black power activists, you know, because by this time the black power movement had come along, and, you know, which was more militant than the old line civil rights organizations had ever been. And so I came out of the army, became an activist, teaching these young men to resist. I was picked up. The first time I was picked up, I remember very distinctly, these cops, they were walking around the neighborhood like they were looking for something, you know what I'm saying? And they were looking for me because they had lost track of me. They were surveilling me. And I used to do things like go out the back door and go up the alleyway and all this kind of stuff. And so they had lost track of me, and they were walking all over the neighborhood looking for me. And so when they did manage to find me this particular first time this happened, they just came over and just grabbed me and punched me around and then threw me in a police car. And, you know, whatever literature or whatever I had on me, they'd take that. They'd threaten me and stick a gun in my head and tell me I better talk and this, that, and the other, and give them information. I wouldn't give them information, and I'd say I don't know anything. I just found these on the street, so you know. But this went on for a long time, this harassment, every time they would see me. And they were following me continually. There was a police car used to park in front of my house or park down the street from my house so they could surveil me day and night. I mean, this kind of stuff. And it got worse. You know, as the war went on, as more black people started coming out against the war, and after Dr. King came out against the war and so forth, it got worse. And then when the Black Panther Party came along, and I joined the Black Panther Party, and I started distributing the Black Panther Party newspaper, and the cops got a hold of these newspapers, and they really got violent with me. And some of the things that they did, you know, like hold a gun to my head. One time stuck a gun down my throat to threaten to shoot me in my throat and all this kind of stuff, and beat me, pistol whip me, and all this kind of stuff. I've got a scar in the back of my head right now, and this is many, many years later, from where I was pistol whipped by a police officer. You know, by a number of police officers actually, just throw me from one to the other, and there's a gauntlet of cops beating me till I was beaten unconscious, and they just left down the street. And this kind of stuff went on and on. And so it was getting to the point, ultimately, where they were going to, after the so-called, after Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered, and there was this huge rebellion, even in the state, you know, in the state of Tennessee. Washington, D.C., of course, we heard about that because it's a big city and so forth, and you know, it got national publicity. But in Tennessee, there were a number of rebellions, you know, by black people there against police terrorism.
And when you first, let me ask you a question, because you were right there. You were a young man. You're in the struggle. You hear Dr. King is killed. How did that? Was that like a baseball bat to your stomach? Like, how did that feel?
Oh, it was worse than that. It was worse than that. It was like somebody ripped out your soul. You know, because one thing you can say about Dr. King, and I'll say that even in this period, I disagreed with you know, his approach. You know, his pretty much a liberal and pacifist approach. I disagreed with that.
Sure. But
I respected him as an individual, and I respected him as a leader. You know, he had committed himself, giving his life over to the struggle. You know, and he knew there was a great possibility that he'd be killed. He knew this when he got involved, and so I had great respect for him. I didn't necessarily agree. And many of us had great respect for Dr. King, even if we disagreed with him. And for them to murder him, is the worst kind of insult, because here's a man that believed and advocated nothing but peace. And they murdered him anyway, you know. And so the young people like myself were outraged. And it just so happened I was in Atlanta at this time, and when I heard about it, in front of SCLC headquarters, I used to go down there, you know, sometimes because I knew some of the people there and everything. And when he was murdered, a large number of us got down there, and we were armed with rifles and pistols and what have you. And, of course, his wife came out, and other members of his family came out and asked us not to engage in violence and so forth and so on, you know, which at the time I didn't want to hear, but I gave them respect. I at least got out in front of the headquarters. I didn't do it there, but we didn't do it there, I should say, but we marched on down the street. And there was going to be an armed confrontation, but the police removed themselves from the black community and went downtown. We were ordered to go out of the black community and to go to you know, white businesses and so forth, and protect the white businesses, especially downtown. So it was like being kicked in the stomach. But more than anything, it just absolutely, utterly enraged me, as it did a lot of black people at that period. They were enraged. Even the people who didn't go out in the street and burn anything or didn't, you know, raise some sort of a militant resistance, they were enraged over the idea that he would be murdered like this.
So not even for a minute, like you weren't like discouraged and said, I'd give up. Not even for a minute.
Not at all. Not at all. No, that made me even more hardcore.
Did you know anybody? Did you know anybody who was just discouraged and gave up?
You know, I'll be quite honest. I never personally met anyone who was. I mean, there are people inside of Dr. King's organization that may have been that way, you know. But even there, I didn't see anyone just give up completely. I didn't see it.
Okay, well,
they may not have known what to do. They may have been destroyed as an organization, and it to some extent it destroyed the movement as an effective movement, although it continued over years. But no, I don't remember that somebody giving up. I remember people being extremely angered and outraged over it. I remember, if anything, some of the pacifist wing of the civil rights movement who were trying to convince people not to take any violent action or forceful action against the government, which nobody paid any attention, especially working class black people who weren't in any organizations whatsoever, who just they respected and loved Dr. King, regardless of what his philosophy was. They knew his philosophy was about freedom. You know, they knew that much.
Gotcha.
And he had given his life for the struggle. And people respected him for that, if nothing else. But I don't remember anyone that just gave up that had been an activist. I don't remember that myself.
Okay, so now you're under more and more surveillance, oppression. They're beating you up. What brought it to a head that you had to hijack a plane?
Well, first of all, let me say that it wasn't just me that was being beaten up. There was the counterintelligence program run by the FBI and the Red Squad programs run by various state governments. Those programs were used to harass a large number of us. I was just one of those in the South, in the city where I was located. And in my case, after the assassination of Dr. King and this rebellion, this black rebellion, this violent black rebellion broke out, I was charged with bombing the offices of a known Ku Klux Klansman. You know, I had nothing to do. It wasn't even in the city at the time.
Okay.
But no matter, it didn't make any difference to them whether I was in the city or not. I was going to be charged. And so they had brought these charges against me, but they were shrewd about it. What they wanted to do was dangle these charges, which they knew were bogus. But they wanted to dangle these charges against me in order to get me, once again, to turn informer.
Right.
And to give information, especially about Willie Ricks, who, you know, they'd been after for years and they were afraid of. And they couldn't get me to do that. And so they started pursuing me once again. And I was told, this is the time I was told that my life would be actually in danger. And so I got out of the city of Chattanooga, went to Atlanta, and I was hoping to stay there for a while. You know, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had its headquarters there. Plus, I had family members there, and you know, I could have stayed there for, you know, indefinite period of time. But in fact, there was a nationwide lookout for me by the FBI, who were seeking me for the bombing and for other charges of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, as they put it. And so I had to go on the run to, you know, save my own life, you know, because there was an order to shoot to kill, because they were saying, oh, this man's armed, he's got guns, he's got dynamite, he was trained in the military, blah, 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 he's a dangerous person.
And they were shooting other Black Panthers at the time.
They were shooting black activists, period.
Yeah.
Not just Black Panthers.
Yeah.
They were shooting to kill. They could, if they caught you under certain circumstances, they would just gun you down. And this was happening all the time. There was no question about that at all. So,
okay, so what happened? You came up with a plan? What did you came up with a plan to leave the country?
Well, my only plan was to go to Cuba.
Okay.
Because at that time, you know, there were a number of airplane hijackings, as they call them. So my plan was to get out of the country the best way I could, because if I felt like if I stayed in the United States, I would have been captured, and most likely would have been killed on the spot, you know. And so I went ahead and had someone draft a letter in Spanish asking for political asylum, and then I went and hijacked a plane out of Cuba headed for, hijacked a plane from Atlanta headed for Miami.
Right.
I diverted that plane to Cuba.
Now, did you use a gun?
I had a pistol and a grenade.
Okay.
I'd been in the Army, so I knew how to handle ordnance. And so I had that, and I took over the plane. And
did you have any help, or you just went on the plane all by yourself?
Well, I can't talk about that part of it. You know,
okay.
I'll be quite honest.
You had no help. You did it all on your own. Okay.
I understand, but you know, at that time, hijacking a plane was a capital offense. You could have been executed.
Okay.
So I can't really talk about that. You know.
Well, let me ask you this then: where were you last week?
Where was I last week?
Yeah, when that Malaysia plane went missing.
Oh, I had nothing to do with that. That's for sure.
I've been dying to use that.
I don't know where that one is myself. No.
Okay, but you get on this plane armed, you take over this plane, and but it didn't go to Cuba. It was diverted?
Well, it didn't go to Miami. It was diverted from Miami to Cuba, which was 90 miles away.
Sure.
Off the shores of the United States. And so it landed in Havana, Cuba. And I was taken off the plane, and I questioned and so forth. And an interesting thing happened there. Because there had been so many of these plane hijackings, the Cuban government was rather hostile and very nervous about these people, people hijacking planes to Cuba. Because they said that, there could be enemy agents among those people. There could be all kinds of people, crazy people or whatever. And so they kind of lumped many of us together. And they were also, at that time, afraid of the Black Panther Party. Because Eldridge Cleaver had been there, and he created some conflict with the Cuban government at the time.
Oh, really?
And so I wound up going to jail in Cuba, and then eventually being sent from Cuba to Czechoslovakia, to get me out of the country.
I thought you wound up in I thought you wound up in Algiers.
Well, no, I didn't wind up in Algiers. Not in my case.
Okay, then I got some misinformation.
I was trying to go to Algiers, but before I could get to Algeria, I was, I left from Cuba, from Havana to, and wound up in Czechoslovakia unexpectedly. And
so what happened? So the Cuban government, you thought you had an ally there, but they betrayed you.
That's essentially it.
And even though I suppose at the time you were kind of supportive of the Cuban Revolution.
Well, I was supportive, but I was more supportive at that time, as my thinking was. I was more supportive of the Chinese Revolution, actually.
Gotcha.
And would have considered myself at that time and maybe even to be a Maoist,
But today you're an anarchist today.
For sure.
Yeah, I've kind of gone the other way around. I started as an anarchist with the hippies in New York. I don't know what I am now. I'd say it's hard to say. I think what we have going on right now sucks. Yeah, it's hard to define yourself these days. Now, how'd you wind up in Czechoslovakia?
Well, the Cubans sent me there, and I was under the impression I was going to another place entirely, or that this would be a leg of the flight to Africa, to Algeria, And in point of fact, I was just dumped here in this place, dumped in at that time what was an occupied Czechoslovakia. There had been a situation where the Russians or the Warsaw Pact troops had invaded Czechoslovakia and had it under military occupation.
Gotcha. Okay, we're coming up to a break, Mr. Ervin. We're coming up to a break. We're with Lorenzo Camboa Ervin, original member of the original Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, down there in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee area. Incredible guy, incredible life story. He's the author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. Are you going to find a link to that book? Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. We're here with Lorenzo Camboa Ervin, author of Anarchism and the Black Revolution. And he's a former Black Panther. And he's also, the man is 67 years old. He came on my show tonight at the last second with a cold. He was just at a big demonstration, rallied up 1,500 street protesters, and not just shortly, a couple of weeks ago. He's off of that. He has a conference coming up next week to organize more resistance. He is a man who's dedicated his life to helping you and me, to fight for you and me, to put his butt on the line for you and me. And I don't think he's given up a moment or taken a rest, okay? This is the kind of man that needs our prayers. He needs our support. So if you can buy his book, the link to his book is going to be up on my blog, the Opperman Report. And on the YouTube, when you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to have a link to it on there as well, so you can email this publishing company and buy this book. Mr. Ervin, okay, now we left off in our adventures of Lorenzo Ervin. You were in a Czechoslovakian jail. Now, I'm curious. Now, when the Cubans sent you there, okay, you went to Cuban jail, thanks to the Cuban Revolution, thank you. But then they sent you off. Was it in a military plane? Did they just give you a plane ticket and put you on a commercial airliner? How'd you get to Czechoslovakia?
It was a Cubana Airlines commercial flight. And they sent myself, and, there were some other people on that flight, too, that were being sent to other countries. Some people who had been Black Panther Party members, not on that particular flight, but had been placed on other flights and sent out of the country in a similar fashion, just because they wanted to get us out of the country. And so I got to Czechoslovakia. And when I got there, there was a lot of confusion, naturally, because they didn't know who the hell I was, and I didn't know I was even supposed to be there. And the people who had flown me there had just left me in a situation there, so I didn't know what was going on.
So wait, let me interrupt, because you're flying over there, and they're giving you the peanuts and the drinks like everybody else. You're on your way to jail.
I mean, yeah. Well, I wasn't put in jail in Czechoslovakia, though. That didn't happen.
Okay.
But for a point of fact, I was.
Now, Algiers was a haven for Black Panthers at the time, wasn't it?
Well, it was, yes. But I never made it to Algiers.
Yeah. Did you ever hear any inside story about what happened when Timothy Leary went to Algiers and then they kicked him out?
Well, yeah, I've heard this. I mean, I don't know of it firsthand. I don't know if it's true or not.
Okay, so let's take off with the Czech. You were in the Czech, and what happened?
Well, I got to Czechoslovakia, and I'm telling them there must be some mistake or something, because I'm supposed to be going to Africa, to Algeria, North Africa.
Right. And
so they take me off the plane, and they essentially put me in, in the society, put me in a hotel and this sort of stuff, and I'm just in this hotel for quite some time, and I guess until the money ran out, until they refused to pay for it or whatever, and and then I'm just to be, I guess, thrown away, would be arrested or whatever. But what they really were trying to do was to set me up for the American authorities to arrest me.
Right.
And I was actually arrested by the American authorities and taken to the American embassy, and I managed to escape from the American embassy.
Really?
And I left, and some African students that I had met and had looked out for me, gave me a place to stay and all this sort of thing. They helped me get out of Czechoslovakia and to go to what was then East Germany, the Democratic Republic of Germany.
Wait, slow down a second. They got you in the American embassy. Did they have like a little jail inside the embassy, or just in a room?
It was in a room, and they were, processing me, and they were bringing me out of the embassy, to take me to a car or something or other. And they had these, they were unarmed security that they had. I guess they were unarmed. I don't know. No, they were armed. I'm sorry. They were armed security. They had these guys going to take me to a car and put me in a car, and and I managed to break away from them and run. And one of them had pulled a gun. I heard the other one say, "Don't shoot him! Don't shoot him in the back here or whatever. It caused an international incident. So on, get the car. We'll run him down." And so they were trying to run me down, with the car to catch me. And I outran them. I outran them, and I got away. And I got back over to where the students were, and they were making arrangements to get me to East Germany. One of them's brother was in the university there in East Berlin, and I was to go there, and they were going to make arrangements to get me a passport and have me go to Conakry.
Because they supported the Black Panther and the American Revolution. They supported this kind of activity. Yeah. Okay.
They
great.
did.
Well, that's beautiful.
And unfortunately, what happened was, before any of this could actually come to pass, I was captured and smuggled across the so-called 5K zone between East and West Germany, and I was taken to an American facility, a military facility, and kept there under arrest. And ultimately, even tortured for information, beaten up, and all this sort of thing before I was brought back to the United States. The FBI wanted to know why I wasn't being brought back to the United States immediately. And, of course, I was being tortured for information and beaten up by American goons, American and German goons. And eventually they did bring me back to the United States, and I was put in a holding facility in New York City for some time.
How long?
And eventually brought back to Georgia and given, and tried before an all-white jury and given 2 life sentences. Faced the death penalty at the time. In fact, faced the death penalty, and the only reason the judge who had sentenced others to death said he wouldn't do it in my case is because if he had done so, he would have attracted, national and international attention.
Yeah, you would have been a martyr.
That's right. And they've had so much publicity and so forth, and they were afraid of it. And so what they decided to do was just sentence me to 2 life terms and just drop me off in the federal prisons and let me die in there because they assumed I'd be stabbed and killed or whatever,
right,
inside the prisons. And so that was essentially what happened to me as far as going to prison. When I got in prison, I became an activist and a leader of the prison struggle inside of there at the time, and actually formed a prison labor union and, worked to create one of the first black cultural studies programs in the federal prison system. Worked to build an international campaign in my behalf, and along the line there somewhere, I started changing my ideology to I got an anarchist book about the original Russian Revolution, the anarchist stage of it, the 1905 revolution particularly, and I started learning things I didn't know about before, and that started me to rethinking my entire ideology, that and other things I'd seen and that I couldn't, factor in at the time. What does this mean? I was seeing, you can see something and you don't quite understand what it means. And so all of this is what made me make this shift in my thinking away from the authoritarian type of radical ideology that I'd been a part of to, anarchist politics. And anarchism essentially
before we get to that,
is a kind of movement.
Wait, before we get to that, because we only got about another 14 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm going to let you take it to the end, okay? But how did you get out of? How long were you in prison, and how did you get out of prison?
Oh my goodness, I was in prison 15 years.
I did not know that, brother. I did not know that. God bless you, man.
Yeah, it was 15 years. Yeah.
Oh my
God. And the only reason I got out, to be quite honest, I would be there right now because I had 2 life sentences without any possibility of parole.
Right.
And I would be there right now. And in fact, some of the people I was in prison with, and I've been out of prison since 1983, and some of the people I was in prison with are still there today. And it was just a fortunate set of circumstances that I did get out when I did. One is that the government was on the defensive about the entire counterintelligence program.
Sure.
And I had filed a lawsuit about what had happened to me, and just this and a number of other things, and getting an international base of support, especially from anarchists and this anarchist Black Cross, which is sort of like an international prison support movement, and getting some support from them. Ultimately, I got out. I mean, it may have been 15 years, but it could have been much worse. I could be there right now, and I realized that. And so, there were people all over the world who spoke out for me. I put pressure on the Carter administration, who was the president. Jimmy Carter was the president.
Yeah, what do you think of Carter? I think he was a pretty good president.
In comparison to what you have now, I would say, he's not nearly as much of an extremist as what you have in office now and what you had in office with George Bush and the others.
Yeah.
It was mild by comparison, to be quite honest.
But you didn't get a pardon. You got some kind of what was the release?
Well, it wasn't an actual pardon. It was a conditional release. It wasn't like actual parole. I was supposed to be on parole for a lifetime.
Right.
But there was a provision in the law that said that if, in fact, if a person was out for 5 years and they were not rearrested or violated any kind of parole regulations, then the onus was on the parole system and on the federal government to prove why you should be kept in custody. And this was little known. I mean, prisoners didn't know about it, and most of the officials, even the parole system, didn't know about it. But I knew about it because one of the things I'd done before I left was to file a Freedom of Information Act request to get the parole regulations, and lo and behold, there it was.
Wow.
And so I used that ultimately to get myself out of the parole supervision.
And if you're on parole, it's almost impossible not to get rearrested on probation or parole because you have no rights. It's like you're in prison. You have no rights to prevent search or seizure. They can come and walk into your house. They can plant evidence on you. Your parole officer or your probation officer can create new conditions of your parole on a whim.
He can.
Yep.
Well, I will say this. My parole officer, because he had himself been subjected to so much racism on the job, he actually wound up supporting me.
Excellent.
And I remember one instance I was having a demonstration downtown against some kind of thing. I can't remember what it was now, but he actually came there, and he saw what I'm doing. He said, "You're not robbing banks, are you?" I said, "No." He said, "You're not committing another criminal offense." He said, "Keep on what you're doing," and left.
God bless him, man.